No telling who might call.
Or when Jason might return.
Ah.
I'm gonna go tell Steve so he doesn't walk in the middle, because I think he wants to be here.
Okay.
Mark's recording from here, so I thought I better shut the door.
Good. Yes, that would be a good idea.
It looks like maybe Brad's recording.
Yep. I got it.
Cool.
Okay,
All right.
I don't have to
So
shut the
we
door.
do because it'll pick up Mark talking.
Right.
Okay, so this code review is about the recent changes to our basic LAMP stack. This hasn't been implemented really anywhere but the journalism servers so far. But this is how we're going to do at least most of our servers moving forward. It involves the addition of Nginx as a front-end proxy, PHP 5.5 with the new opcache feature, and yeah, that's mostly it. For load balanced servers, we'll also be using database replication and lsyncd for file replication. Let's see. We'll start with the biggest part, which would be Nginx. Basically, we decided to start using Nginx because Apache has very large overhead for every single request. We found that on most servers, Apache has a lot of trouble handling more than, between 20 and 50 requests based on how much RAM the server has. But it's generally around like 20 to 30 megs per request, and that includes requests that are just handling static files like CSS or images or whatever. And it's a big limitation because even when we have a large server, they can't really host as much. They can't serve as many files just because that's how we're limited memory-wise. And Nginx, putting that in front of Apache tends to increase our capabilities quite a bit. In the testing that I did on a 512 meg server, doing around 10,000 requests, 30 concurrent requests, I saw with just Apache we would get around 20 files served per second, and with Nginx in front of Apache it was somewhere around 1,400 per second. So it was a drastic increase. Nginx is made as just a lightweight general web server made by the Russians, which makes it pretty fun. Let's see. We'll look at the nginx.conf. And you can see it's definitely organized a lot different from Apache. Apache kind of has a pseudo XML type of configuration. This, all of the commands end with the semicolon, and the blocks are opened and closed with curly braces. This generally, I have it set at 50 worker processes, which is probably a little bit excessive. Oh, this is the current journalism configuration. I have right now in Puppet the worker processes and the worker connections can be changed from server to server, which we'll probably tweak here and there later on as we do some more testing with it and figure out what seems to work best.
Is that a maximum, or is that how many processes fire up and then are sitting there waiting here?
I think that's a maximum. It won't go above that, and each process really doesn't seem to take up that much memory. I found that while doing the test, that kind of led to the 20 files a second versus 1,400 files a second. That was um, that was using up a lot less resources as well. Apache kind of maxed out the server for RAM, whereas Nginx, I think, was only using about a third to a fourth of all of the RAM. So, yeah, it's nice. And then the worker connections, that's how many, theoretically, how many concurrent connections you can have, which would really help graphs specifically, because we've historically had problems with people having dial-up connections connecting to graphs, and they eat up a lot of the active connections. Whereas, if we could put Nginx in front of that and serve all of the static files with something that doesn't really use up very much memory, that would be a lot better, and that would allow them to take their time downloading on their dial-up.
Would this also help the ticket booking system?
It probably would. It would allow them to put more people on a smaller server. It kind of the benefit that we get from Nginx is that you can, because serving static files doesn't really take as much memory, you can have more people on a server.
Mm-hmm. As we've seen in the years past, we have the WordPress instance for true false, and it was not being cached, and that was causing problems with the server, because when all of the people were reserving tickets, it couldn't get past that, and so Brad tweaked the heck out of that last year and did a great job with getting the server optimized. But it sounds like, Brad, this would be a way to help the people that are sitting there with two browsers open, because they've got the schedule of events open, their calendar of events open from WordPress, and then in the other tab they're actually booking the tickets.
Well, when it comes to like the ticket reservations or like e-commerce on Graph,
yeah.
This will only help to a certain degree. Like with ticket reservations, every click they do actually does incur a write to the database and a bunch of PHP running.
Right.
So that PHP is expensive whether you're in Apache or Nginx or whatever.
Right. My point was the WordPress side of that, with the calendar and the schedule part. That's all kind of static content.
Yeah, I mean, that's already to the point that
It's tweaked.
I think, yeah, but
Okay.
it's if nothing else, it would reduce the number of open Apache instances for the static files themselves. So I mean, it would help reduce the RAM usage. But at this point, with true false in particular, it's really for that 1 week of the year, shove
Right.
that server up to 32 gigs of RAM and let it do its thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Moving on, there's I don't know, most of this is pretty typical stuff, and most of the stuff that I added. I've been using Augeas to add a whole bunch of these configurations, and it's a tool that allows you to, if you wanted to script adding some different settings to some configuration file, that's probably the easiest way to do it. For example, all of these settings down here need to be within the HTTP block. They don't work outside of that. And so I used Augeas, and it just automatically found the HTTP block and put all of these things inside. So that made it a lot easier. I have a whole bunch of gzip settings that basically just make sure everything that can be is gzipped, excluding Internet Explorer 1 through 6. The TCP, no delay, and TCP no push. I can't remember exactly what that is, but I think that was where it uses some things in the kernel so that whenever it's serving static files, it doesn't have to do as much processing, and it just uses the kernel to push it from the disk straight through into the socket so that it doesn't have to do too much on its end, and it makes it a little bit faster. The open file cache is something that's pretty neat. It instead of opening a file handle to a file and then serving the file and then dropping it, it will, if it finds that it would be better to hold on to it, it will. If for min uses, I have that set to 2. So if you just request the file once, it won't do anything. But the second time that you request it within 30 seconds, it will go ahead and cache that file handle instead of closing it, and then it'll close it after 20 seconds of being inactive, and it has a maximum of 1,000. So it kind of saves a minuscule amount of time in the opening a file and closing a file. It just caches all of those file handles whenever it can. Most of the rest of these, I just set. I can't remember exactly why they were required, but I was having a few issues with a few redirects. I think it was that the header section of the HTTP request was too large, and I just needed to bump a few things up a little bit. So if we go into the vhosts, that's pretty simple. I mostly copied a lot of the vhost for Apache. It just has a server name for each of the aliases. A few proxy settings, and these 3 conditionals right here are basically what happened to break the journalism. A few of the things on the journalism site
The
on
search?
Monday.
The search?
The search included. There was one page where there was some AJAX requests that weren't showing up, and then later in the day, Warren noted that the admin bar wasn't showing up. And so the issues for those, the search, I basically found that if you go, let me open a browser. If you go to the journalism website and then just search for a test, which is taking a while, you can see in the URL that it has the query string s equals test, and basically the way that I had it written before, here in try files, it tries to look for this file, and then it'll try to look for the next file and the next one and the next one. And basically what was happening was this wasn't accounting for having a query string. So it said that I'm looking for journalism.missouri.edu/, and then it was saying, okay, well, I have a cached version of the homepage, so I'm just going to serve that. So it was serving the homepage instead of actually searching for anything. And this conditional basically just says if there is any sort of a query string, go ahead and proxy it to Apache. So if we were to go to this page and then say, just give it the query string of A, Wow, there's not actually that much of a difference on this page specifically. It's hitting Apache on this page just because there is something in the query string. And then also with the AJAX request, there is basically something that it didn't think that it was supposed to go to PHP because it wasn't directly accessing a PHP file. It was accessing something that looked like a 404, so it was going to, I think there was a cached version of it. But Nginx doesn't actually support, by default, it doesn't support post requests. So if you send it a post request, it's going to tell you, I think it's error 4 or 5, bad request. So that's what was happening. So with this, I basically just said, if it's a post request, forward it to Apache. And then, of course, here is the fix for users that are logged in to get the admin bar showing back up. They just needed to not be shown cached files. So I have that proxy to Apache if they're logged in.
What about gets?
Huh?
What about gets? Request methods get.
Oh, if it's Git,
Then
then
the
it
top
just
one?
goes through the normal things of it doesn't proxy it
Well, the top
Unless-
thing would happen because it's in the variables, right? Or the arguments.
in the top. Oh, for these
Like
three?
line 10, if it was get, since it's all in the line.
If it's this is for if it has a query string.
That's what I mean.
If it's a Git with a query string, then it'll just say it has a query string, so go ahead and
Pass it on.
proxy it.
Gotcha.
So if it has a query string, or if it's a post request.
Gotcha.
And this line basically just looks for cached files, and then it looks for if the file exists, like if it's just a CSS file somewhere. And then the last part of that, the index.php, that's just to forward it onto Apache. It thinks that it's going for a PHP file, so it ignores it and goes to Apache.
So this Apache is now sitting on port 81.
Apache is now in port 81. I added in as much as I could to make that more of an automatic thing.
Yeah.
If I move over to my Puppet configuration, modules, Nginx, here we see, here's all the settings that I changed. And where is it? Here it is. So for httpd.conf, I have it set to change the listen to 81. I think I'm probably going to end up removing that and making that more of a manual step because there have been a few issues with, like, say if it were to listen on multiple ports, if it had multiple listen statements, this would fail. It would do some really weird things, and I tried a whole bunch of different stuff, and I was unable to get name virtual host to work reliably on any servers that have multiple IP addresses. They have a name virtual host line in the configuration for each individual IP, so that that just messes with that a whole lot. So I figured it wouldn't really be that bad to change all instances of 80 to 81 in one file manually every time we set up Nginx on a server. And probably most of the time, moving forward, it's going to be something that's part of the original server setup. And in the let's see, modules, there's a custom type for vhost, and this has been in use since before Nginx. Yeah, here I have it set up to basically say, if this website is using Nginx, then just add one to the port. So Apache will be listening on port 81 for regular HTTP traffic and port 444 for SSL traffic. Yeah, so when we look at how that's actually used, we can open this up and we see the server class, server rack space, and then we basically just set Nginx to true. We set, I guess web actually defaults to true. But then we set the PHP version to 5.5, Augeas version to 1.1.0. They didn't start in the default version for CentOS. If you don't add any additional repositories, you only get Augeas version 0.9, and the one that supports Nginx is 1.0. So yeah, there's that. And then I guess PHP 5.5 is significantly simpler. We found that the repository that we've been using for PHP 5.4 has been fairly reliable, we found, and they update fairly often and add in all of the security patches and whatnot. And we found that they have a separate repository that includes PHP 5.5, and they keep that fairly up to date security patch wise. So that's been the source of PHP 5.5 for us. So we don't have to compile it. We don't have to worry about weird updates and whatnot. But really, server-wise, PHP 5.5 doesn't really change a whole lot, but it does add the new op cache, which used to be something that you had to pay for, but they decided to just go ahead and integrate it into PHP 5.5. It is, it's been pretty useful so far. Let me bring up the, I guess PHP. Yeah, I have it set up so that we can change per server a few different things. The maximum memory usage for the op cache, the number of files, and I think the other one is actually just whether it's enabled or not. I guess I forgot to mention in case if there's someone that doesn't know, the op cache, it stores the PHP opcode. So after it reads and compiles a PHP file, it will save that compiled version in the cache. So if it needs to call that file again, it just pulls it from the cache and it already has a compiled version. I guess Zend said that generally speaking, it will speed up your website around 3 times, which is about what we've seen. On some websites, they're only around like 2 times as fast for a lot of the PHP files being loaded and whatnot, but it really depends. Overall, it's been fairly useful. It replaces most of APC. We're still going to be using APCU, which the U stands for user space. So all of the calls that we make in PHP to add things to APC or to pull things from APC those will still be there, and those will still be using a completely different cache. So that'll have all of its own settings, and we'll need to tweak that per server because we still could run into the same issues that we had before with APC, where we turn the opcode cache on and it would fill up the cache, and then once it got full, it would start generating fatal errors on every page until we cleared it.
Is that because the max wasted space, or is that
Uh,
because it would fill up?
it's just a bug in APC.
Gotcha.
I think they're aware of it, and they just haven't fixed it.
Gotcha. Would that max wasted space thing help? Because obviously it says restart is scheduled. If it knows it's beacon,
Well, this is actually
it's a
for
different thing.
this is for op cache,
That's again like 21 there.
right? I mean, they might have something like that in APC that's
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
causing some issues.
I'm sorry, I was confusing app cache with APC.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, unless anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Mark. I have a question.
Sure.
With Apache, I know they have an option whereby you can basically restart the server without actually killing the process and having it restart. Is there something similar in Nginx to, I guess, Apache control graceful? I believe it's the SIG-user1 signal you can send Apache. I just wondered if there was kind of a similar thing, or if maybe the mechanism inside Nginx for restarting was similar in that it wouldn't drop any existing connections when it restarts.
You know, I haven't actually looked into that yet.
Okay, maybe it's something I could look into.
Yeah, I mean, it has a reload, but I'm not sure if that actually drops any of the connections or not. I'll have to check that out. Does anyone else have any questions?
Well, I guess what are the next steps? Like, if I wanted to experiment with this on Graph and Sons, what would I have to do?
Like to upgrade a server to PHP 5.5.
Yeah, and throw Nginx in there in front of Apache.
It's fairly simple. If you have some of the servers are using a server : rackspace class in Puppet, and there is an Nginx flag that defaults to false. And if you just set that as true, set the Nginx parameter to true, that will install Nginx, and it will change all of the ports as needed everywhere except httpd.conf. So you'll have to change. Most servers will only have 2 lines that you actually have to change for that. And then there's also I think it's a PHP version flag somewhere. Yeah, PHP version. You just need to set that to 5.5 instead of 5.3.
Okay, cool.
And then that upgrades.
That's all it takes upgrade.
Yeah, it upgrades Apache, or it upgrades PHP, and then you have those 3 PHP opcache lines, and I think those actually have fairly sane defaults. So I'd really just add those if you're going to be tweaking things later on. Yeah. Is there any more questions?
What's the next one you're going to do?
I'm currently working on Callaway Bank. I'm probably going to cut them over maybe sometime this weekend.
Zurek.
And then Mizzurek right after that. Mizzurek's going to be a little bit different because with journalism and with journalism and Callaway Bank, I've been adding MySQL replication and lsyncd for the file replication because they have the two servers.
Gotcha.
And so with Mizzou Rec, they only have one server, so it's only going to be Nginx and PHP 5.5 with Opcache.
And so everybody else knows those two servers are on a load balancer because we pretty much charge them a higher rate for hosting because they don't want to be down ever.
Right.
So we load balance them anyway. So that's kind of belt and suspenders. On top of being fast, it's also one of these jacks out, the other one kicks in. So
Right. Yeah, and with I guess that's on a different topic.
load balancer.
Well, for Callaway Bank, I had to do something really weird for their load balancer, just because they have SSL. So
All right.
the Rackspace Cloud load balancers only allow one port out to the servers. So I had to squash everything to HTTP, and then trick the server into thinking that it was still running HTTPS, so that it would return the HTTPS links. So that was a good time. Yeah, I think that's about it, unless anyone else has anything.
Cool.
I had one more thing. I just looked it up, and it turns out if you send the master process the HUP signal, it will gracefully shut down old worker processes and start new worker processes with a new configuration. So they built that in.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I guess it doesn't really have the issues that Apache would if it was running PHP. If it's just serving static files, then you're not going to have any processes that are going to hang. Okay. I guess that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
See you guys.